Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squad for boxing news and views from around the internet. Deontay Wilder has revealed he broke his right arm 3 months before he began training camp for the Tyson Fury fight. And I've got so many questions about this, and most of it doesn't relate to the Tyson Fury fight itself. There is some questions there, but most of it sort of knocking around in my mind relates to when did it happen, could that have prohibited him fighting Anthony Joshua even if they had have agreed a fight? Did this delay the Tyson Fury fight and all that sort of stuff? But above all, Deontay Wilder, how durable is this guy? Is he currently holding an injury after the Fury fight that he hasn't disclosed? Because this injury, a serious injury, was kept quiet until now. And it's got me asking serious questions about this guy's durability. How long can he remain in the sport if he's continually breaking his bones, and more specifically his hands and arms? So he's had a number of injuries, and we'll canvass that shortly, but let's crack into the story. So the boxingscene.com story, it quotes barbershop conversations as having spoken to Deontay Wilder, and Wilder stated, "A lot of people don't know that 12 weeks before camp I broke my arm. We kept that a secret. I had surgery and everything. I broke my arm from here all the way up to here. I got cut," and then it has Wilder gesturing a left pointer finger as part of his description to trace an area inside of his right arm just above his wrist to below the elbow. Wilder continues, "I was sparring and just getting ready. I was getting the best of my sparring partner. I was going to the body and he turned and his elbow was out. My bone and his elbow went together like a hammer to a nail, and it just broke. We wanted to keep that sewed up. We don't make excuses. That whole camp I barely threw punches, so that could have been a reason with being anxious to wanting to get Fury out of there so badly." And the story goes on to say, in a text to Boxing Scene, Wilder stated the surgery lasted about an hour and a half, that he wore a cast no more than a week, and therapeutically rehabbed for about 3 to 4 weeks. So that's the sum total of the story there. So Deontay Wilder reveals he broke his arm. And if you go back and go, okay, he entered camp, and that was in early October. So the press tour, it wrapped up on October the 4th, so camp started the next day, October the 5th. And if you work your way back through a calendar, 12 weeks before that is mid-July. So by my reckoning, counting back on the calendar, July the 13th, or thereabouts. Wilder's not specific on the date that he broke it, just saying it was about 12 weeks before camp. And I did that math as well, because instantly when I sort of thought, hang on, do the dates line up here? Because it got me wondering about the negotiation with Anthony Joshua. But that wrapped up or concluded in late June. That was June the 26th. So Deontay Wilder, from what he is saying, broke his elbow or broke his arm sometime in mid-July. So certainly that raises the question, even if an undisputed fight had have been made, would Deontay Wilder, coming off a surgery which presumably was to reset his arm, would he have been able to fight Anthony Joshua on September the 22nd? I would think potentially it's unlikely. I just don't think he would have been able to, have that confidence. If he's saying that potentially he didn't throw many punches in his camp, and that potentially made him anxious to want to, with fighting Tyson Fury in December, I can't see him being able to have fought Anthony Joshua in September. So even if that fight had have been made, which we know it wasn't, but if it had have been made, it likely would have had to been postponed because of this injury. I think that is a reality of the situation. But in terms of this fight with Tyson Fury, the dates got me thinking as well, because remember, we were being told that this thing was locked up, easy to make, and all that sort of stuff, but then there was a delay effectively of a month to announce when the fight was going to be taking place. And one of the things that was sort of said at the time was it was about venues and trying to lock in that end of the deal. And I just wonder, with this broken arm, potentially with the way Wilder's arm was healing, maybe they actually, part of the reason that there was this delay was they were pushing for the date to be as far out as possible. So December 1st, giving Deontay Wilder more time to recover, rehab the arm, get it back to close to full strength, whatever. But he's saying, the whole camp, I barely threw punches. So that could have been a reason with being anxious to wanting to get Fury out of there so badly. And he says they kept it secret because they didn't want to make excuses. But I guess the revelation of this now, it does sound like a bit of an excuse, especially when he follows it up with saying it could have been a reason with being anxious to wanting to get Tyson Fury out of there so badly. And in his post to his fans on a social media, so his Instagram post, he said, the event brought more pressure than I expected. I just wanted the best for boxing here in America and boxing in general, and which led me to get overly anxious to knock his head off, so I abandoned the game plan. So that sort of lines up with this other quote where he's saying, he got anxious to wanting to get Fury out of there. So, there's a whole range of questions I have about Deontay Wilder and his durability at this point in his career. And so the story continues, just sort of backgrounding some of Deontay Wilder's injuries. Wilder required separate surgeries to repair a broken right hand and torn biceps in the same arm suffered during a July 2016 stoppage of Chris Arreola. The dual surgeries followed a brief procedure to help stabilize the hand. At that point, Wilder had broken his right hand at least 3 times in 7 years, having had metal pins inserted after an injury he suffered in his 7th professional fight, a 90-second stoppage of Travis Allen in August 2009. Wilder then refractured the hand against Stavern in January 2015 when he won the world title, but he didn't require surgery following a second break. And this is just some of what boxing scene has on file, has on record. There could be other injuries, and I know there is, because in about July of last year, Deontay Wilder, who'd sort of been out of the spotlight for a few months after his win against Gerald Washington, he was mandated to face Stavern, but he kind of went a bit ghosted for about 2 or 3 months, and later, it was July or August of 2017, he actually said he had been rehabbing a hand injury. So we know he's got this history of getting hand injuries, more than is just reported in the media. He's kept this one secret. I have to ask myself after this fight with Tyson Fury, which he was throwing the kitchen sink, wasn't always landing, but when he did land, what has that done to his body? Is he carrying an injury to one of his hands or arms, some part of that part of his body at the moment? Is he going to have to rehab another injury before he can get back in the ring for another fight? Because you would have to wonder, on the strength of all these injuries, he's just coming off a broken arm. So this is 4 or 5 months ago, and he's hitting Fury with the kitchen sink. You'd have to wonder, how is his body holding up? Because clearly there is some durability issues, and it gets me asking the question, what next for Deontay Wilder? Because can his body take the rigors of the sport for much longer? Can Deontay Wilder stay healthy? The reality is, he's 33 years old now. He has repeated injuries to his hands. He's got metal pins in his hands. He's broken his arm. He's torn a bicep before. These are all hand and arm related injuries. Can he stick it out in the sport here? I mean, what sort of rehabbing is he going to have to do now after this fight? Remember, he did ultimately connect on some shots, so that could have done some damage. And he's saying in his camp, he barely threw some punches, even though we were hearing it was the best camp in history. I mean, this is why boxers and, promoters, you can barely believe anything that they say, because every camp is always the best camp that they've ever had, that it was just going so well, the sparring was great and all that sort of stuff. And Deontay Wilder had sparring partners coming in from all over the world. I guess actually it maybe could explain some of what we saw in some of the footage that did come out. Deontay Wilder without gloves on, shadow boxing with Malik Scott, who was trying to mimic Tyson Fury. They were obviously looking to preserve his hands, his arm. They didn't want to put too much pressure on it and risk a break ahead of that fight. Because if someone pulled out and someone got injured ahead of that fight, they never would have lived it down. There were a number of people heading into that Fury and Wilder fight saying the fight was never going to happen. Someone was going to pull out, that it just wasn't going to be an event that would ever be staged. But Deontay Wilder was clearly limping to the finish line to get to that fight, to get into the position to knock Tyson Fury out, which he almost did. But I have to ask myself, can Deontay Wilder sustain the rigors of being an elite boxer for much longer? You'd have to wonder. And certainly some of what he's saying is coming across as a bit of an excuse, especially coupled with other statements. He says he doesn't want to make any excuses, but is that an excuse? I mean, please tell me. And also the question about his weight of 212 pounds, does it also explain why he's come in so light for this fight? That he couldn't do some of the things potentially in the weeks and months leading up to this fight, that he's had to limit some of what his training load otherwise would have been. I think potentially it could be an explanation in part for that weight, although I do think he is consciously coming in at a lower weight these days. And perhaps also that is to reduce the stresses on his body, because if he's carrying extra weight, extra muscle, that is an extra load on himself. But yeah, certainly a lot of questions sort of knocking around in my mind about this. The most obvious one being Deontay Wilder. Is this guy going to be able to stay healthy for big fights? Is he going to have 6 months, 8 months off now to rehab another injury? If he is injured right now, I can't see him fighting Anthony Joshua in April. If he is injured right now, a rematch with Tyson Fury, it may not happen in the first 6 months of 2019. And Deontay Wilder's only been fighting a couple of times a year in most recent years, and in large part that has been down to his injuries. So you'd have to ask yourself, what next for Deontay Wilder? Let me know. Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.